My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. Thank you for joining us. We have a special guest, as you may recall. Mark Carlson was with us. He's been with us a couple of times. And, he has a friend that he thought would be an interesting guest, and we reached out to him, or Mark reached out to him, and it turned out he was able to get permission to come, so make sure to don't do anything that he wasn't supposed to do. So we have with us this evening, give a big warm round of applause for Detective Byron Kastilahn, correct? I got that correct?
Yeah.
All right. First of all, thank you, Detective, for coming out here on a snowy Tuesday night. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And, we'll just cut to the chase here. We let everybody know that you are a cold case detective up in Weld County. Why don't you tell everybody first kind of where is Weld County in relation to Denver?
Well, it's north of Denver. The counties of Denver are like Boulder and Adams County, and then Weld County is just north of Adams County, so north of Brighton, that area, all the way up to Cheyenne. And then it's from Larimer County to Morgan County and Sterling County on the east.
It's one of the larger counties, is it not, up here in the northeastern part of the state?
Yeah, I think it's around 4,000 square miles.
Yeah. And as a native of Colorado, Weld County, to go to Erie, to go to Greeley, Windsor, that was an excursion. Why would you go all the way up there? And now it's just another drive in the afternoon. Yeah. Everything's gotten a lot smaller, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you give us a bio? Why don't you give us your bio? When did you become a police officer? How did you get into police work? Why did you get into police work? And kind of tell us how you got to where you are today.
Well, I wanted to be in the FBI, and to be an FBI agent, you had to have a law degree or an accounting degree. So neither of those were interesting to me, but if you got any degree and were a police officer, something like that, then you could get into the FBI. So I went to Colorado State University, studied social science with a history minor, and got in criminal justice interdiscipline. And went to the police academy in 1994. And first, sworn position was with the Colorado State University Police Department. I was a student officer there.
Sure.
And then I got hired with the Brighton Police Department in 1997. And that's where I met our mutual friend, Mark Carlson.
Okay.
And somewhere along the line, I realized I could be an FBI agent, but I might get assigned to Bangor, Maine, or somewhere, and I was married and didn't want to, move. I liked Colorado, so I realized, well, detectives do pretty much the same job as FBI, and they don't have to drive or, relocate.
Yeah.
So that seemed like a better career path. And then also when I became a patrol officer, I really enjoyed that. Mark Carlson was the DUI enforcement officer when I started in Brighton. So all he did was DUIs. And in 1998, I did that job, and I really enjoyed, doing that. I thought, what more proactive job in law enforcement and patrol can you do than getting drunk drivers off the road?
Sure, which is always a good thing.
Yeah. So, and then became a detective in 2003, and Mark was the sergeant of investigations in Brighton. So I did that, enjoyed that. And then, so 2018, I wanted to try something different, and I went to the coroner's office with Weld County. Because as a detective, I'd done a lot of property crimes, frauds and forgeries and stuff like that, and I didn't really do a lot of persons crimes. I always thought,
I think most people think detectives are doing nothing but homicide cases, when in reality, there's a lot of other crime out there.
Yeah.
Property crime, motor vehicle. I mean, that kind of runs the whole gamut, right?
Yeah. But then the coroner's office, all you do is death investigations. So I found that really interesting. The Weld County Coroner's Office was a good place to work. I enjoyed doing it. But then I realized, well, I kind of miss police work.
Sure.
I'm already with the county, so let's go to the sheriff's office. Still with the county. It doesn't change anything, just going to a different office. And so I went to the sheriff's office in 2019, and then I went to investigations in 2020. I was just the regular detective doing property and persons crimes and all that.
Sure.
And the cold case position was available, so I put in for that and started doing that just a few months after being in the investigations unit.
How big is the Weld County Sheriff's Department up there?
I think, boy, I'm not sure, because we got the jail and there's several hundred.
Yeah, because the sheriff is usually broken up. They have the detention officers, right? And then you have the street, then you have other branches, so to speak, of the sheriff's office.
Yeah, and investigations is part of the patrol division. And boy, I want to guess we're around 80 patrol officers, but maybe more when you consider investigations, the training unit. Mm-hmm. We have a strike team, civil unit. So there's various, areas that you can specialize in with the sheriff's office.
Okay. But you guys have a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
I don't think most people realize, at least here in Colorado, you have the county, and then that has the sheriff. But in that county, you have police departments that only are responsible for a very small portion of that jurisdiction, whereas you guys can cover kind of everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have so much of I-76 from Adams County, from Brighton, basically, out to past Roggen and over to the Morgan County line. So, several, dozens of miles of highway I-25, highway 34. And we're really the only ones out there in the county other than State Patrol. And State Patrol handles like the accident and they're doing traffic, but then we assist in that. But then we're also doing the, if a domestic violence situation happens out in the county, we would do that, not State Patrol.
Yeah, I'm saying, and I don't think for people who may not know, I mean, Weld County is big. You have a lot of territory to cover. I mean, obviously from here, more on the front range, so to speak, in the sense of the greater Denver area, you're not that far away. But it goes almost to the Wyoming state line, which is, if you're driving a B line, it's 2 hours, I think, 2.5 hours. Yeah. And then you going almost to the Kansas-Nebraska state line in either direction as well. So it's a lot of area to cover. So you guys have your work cut out for you for sure. Yeah,
and on the north, we border Wyoming and Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So you make it back to detectives. How did you get into the cold case? How did that happen?
So Sheriff Reams had been part of the statewide cold case organization that's kind of run by Colorado Bureau of Investigations. There's a state group. We meet every 3 months, and the sheriff had always been a part of that, and then he had wanted to have the position for a while. So, once that position came up, I expressed interest and got that, and so and Sheriff Reams has kind of directed the direction the investigations go, because he gave me like 5 cases that he wanted to go with based on the age of the case or older cases, possible, likelihood of being solved, or at least get an idea of what happened in the case. And those are the 5 cases I started with.
Okay. So, I mean, tell me what it's like, kind of a day in the life of a cold case detective. Obviously, if you're on the street, you go to work, you're patrolling, you're getting calls for service. Cold case detective, I'm assuming you're kind of on your own, right? I mean, going back through, re-interviewing. Tell us kind of, like you said, the sheriff said, hey, I got 5 cases that I think we can solve based upon, I'm assuming, the nature of the crime, some evidence that you think may exist. What other factors do you look at as far as where you focus your energy? Because obviously there's a lot of cold cases out there, not only in your jurisdiction but statewide, where family members would like closure. I mean, that's probably pretty rewarding, isn't it, when you think, hey, we've solved this case?
Yeah. So, and it's not only different from patrol, but it's different from a regular investigator job. As a detective, I'd get a case, and all I'd read is the initial report from the patrol officer or patrol deputy, and then I'd start doing all the interviews with everybody and getting video, stuff like that, doing search warrants. With a cold case, it's a lot of reading, because I'm not only reading the initial case from the deputy that took the call, but I'm reading all the supplements from those patrol deputies, supplements from investigators from the 1970s, investigators who looked at it in the 80s, maybe the 90s, and you got to like to read, which is I do, so that helps. As a history minor, I like history, so reading these cases is a little bit of Weld County history. It's fascinating, especially just the difference in technology and techniques that were used. Like, we had cases in the 70s where a psychic was, looking into it and giving her input. Had a case where sodium pentothal was used on a suspect with the permission of his attorney. And for those who don't know, sodium pentothal is like truth serum that they would give Nazis to try to get them to crack. Hypnosis was used. So, interesting methods.
Yeah. I mean, and so I've had a cold case that went back years and years, and nothing as far back as the 70s. But, I mean, obviously you have to go see if the original witnesses are still around, right? And if not, how do you go from there?
Yeah, that's obviously really tough. You just go with what you have. Try to act on, and that's why the older cases are obviously important. In 1975, in the summer, Marjorie Fithian was killed north of Roggen, which was out on I-76. Killed on a dirt road. She had her young child. Her son was with her. He wasn't harmed, but she was killed. And there were suspects in the drug scene, because she lived in Greeley, and they were known drug users or dealers in Greeley in the 70s. So the investigators back then looked at them a lot. And because they were in that lifestyle, a lot of them had passed away. There was one guy who had said that he was in the car when she was shot by the murderer. And he gave this really good story about what happened, a very believable story. And he was the one who was put under sodium pentothal. But it turned out he made the story up so that he could get off on some drug charges. So it's May of 2020, and I tracked him down and found him, had him come in for an interview, and he did verify that, he corroborated what he said earlier. Because if he did witness it, tell me now, please.
Sure.
But if he didn't, if he made this up, also tell me now. And he explained, just like he did later on in the investigation, that he had made it up to try to get some leeway on some drug charges that he had. So he told me that in May, and in July he had died. So I was able to get him in an interview before that happened. So not that it broke the case, but it's very helpful. It could have, don't know. But you want to get as many people in that are still alive to give a statement that you can. That's what I did when I looked through the cases. I wanted to, one, find out what witnesses are still alive and who are maybe old enough that they need to be acted upon quickly, and then what DNA evidence do we have, or any evidence for that?
And obviously, DNA evidence has come a long way over the years. I remember when I'd had a case. This is probably like 1997. I was still in the Marine Corps, and they were using this DNA, and it was still questionable science. And now it's just accepted as science. And we were litigating it. But how do you look at a case now and go back and look at the evidence that's been in an evidence locker for 20, 30, 40, 50 years and say, hey, there may be something of evidentiary value here. Do you go with lab personnel, or is it your call? I mean, that's expensive testing too. So do you have to weigh, what gets tested and what doesn't?
Yeah, and that's come up. Like I said, this first thing I look at is what evidence we have and what could possibly be DNA evidence. And, this technology of DNA is, so I don't know what cold case detectives did in, the 80s. It's been beneficial. Genetic genealogy. We have this thing called the MVAC, and it's basically a vacuum that can possibly get DNA from surfaces that couldn't get DNA from prior, like rock. And so you have to look at the evidence now as is this something we could use the MVAC on? Is this something that would be useful with genetic genealogy? So there's other options.
So explain the genetic genealogy, what that is, and why that is such a game changer.
Well, it's in its infancy. It's a pretty new technology, but just an overview of it is that you can get some unknown DNA from a case. You don't have a suspect. You take it to a lab where they are able to identify that DNA is related through something like Ancestry.com or GEDmatch. And these are, websites where you can send your saliva to like Ancestry, and they'll tell you, what percentage European, what percentage Asian, or whatever, what your background is for, family lineage, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so they have a database, and if people opt in for that, to be that information to be made known to law enforcement agencies, then they can maybe get a grandfather or something, and then go down from there and do basically a family tree. And okay, now you have, let's say, 2 sons and a daughter, because we think it went down here because they lived in northern Colorado. Well, but let's say one brother and one daughter lived in Boulder and Fort Collins, and this other third sibling lived in Greeley, and then you had the murder happened in Greeley. So that would create a pretty good suspect of him, because we have the DNA that we narrowed down to this family, and then now we have him at the location.
Near the location, so at least you're getting warmer, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's a simplification of it, but that's kind of the general.
Sure. And I think it's going to be a game changer, because before, they had this DNA, they test it, they get the DNA profile with all the different loci, I think is the correct term for it. And then they kind of had to wait and maybe put it into the CODIS system, for to get a hit. But now you guys can really kind of be proactive in saying, hey, genealogy.com, who does this belong to?
Yeah.
That's going to be huge, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And Weld County Sheriff's Office is working on trying to identify some unidentified remains, some bodies that were found and no identification to them. And with that, I'm hoping to just identify who the victim is, and then, because we can't really investigate what happened to them if we don't know anything about them. Sure.
How many of the cold cases are, for example, you found, somebody was shot on the side of the road. You got an idea, you can at least maybe start from her lifestyle. Maybe she was living in a not great lifestyle. But what if you out there, somebody commits a terrible crime in Denver and they dump the body off in what they think is a safe place out in the field somewhere just to dispose of it? How many of those kind of cases, of your active case file, what percentage do you think is something like that?
Boy, let's see, we have about 7 out of a caseload of 40.
Wow. Yeah. So you have 40. What's the coldest or the oldest case that you have right now?
Well, the cases don't, they either get solved or they stay cold. So, but Marjorie Fithian was 1975. 1973, we have an unidentified body. But yeah, not much could go with that. So 70s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was the Marjorie Fithian case, was that the one that we kind of discussed about?
North of Roggen.
Okay. And were you able to come up with a suspect in that case?
No. That one, I think, might be a serial killer or a drifter, because there's nobody involved in her circle of friends or associates. I mean, she smoked marijuana. 1975. That's not any. So that's really the only thing seemed that they had to go on to look at their drug connection. Her drug connections, which is whoever she brought. But
Yeah.
a couple joints from it once a month.
So compare as a cold detective to, kind of a, whatever crime detective right now. Obviously, sergeant comes in and says, hey, here's your case, whether it's a homicide or motor vehicle theft, doesn't matter. And you, try to go talk with people. And sometimes people are very cooperative. Sometimes they're like, I'm not talking to the police. I don't know nothing about nothing. I didn't see anything, right?
Yeah.
Do people get a little more loose-lipped as the years go by?
I would, I had that notion when I went into the position, because time goes by, or not, maybe you're not concerned about somebody who was threatening to you back in 1981. So,
yeah.
But I have, on one hand, I've had, pretty good cooperation from everybody. I haven't had anybody just hang up on me or say, oh, no, I'm not going to talk to you, which is common when I was a regular detective or a patrol deputy.
Because, I mean, a lot of times the crime that's committed against people are people that are in a certain culture that don't want to cooperate with the police, so to speak, and usually other criminals, so to speak.
Yeah.
But like I said, a cold case, it's like, it's usually a death. Somebody, this is what I heard on the street, something along those lines, right?
Yeah. And while I have had plenty of cooperation, I haven't had that conversation with somebody where it said, yeah, I didn't want to say anything back then, but I'll tell you now. That really hasn't happened. I've had kind of the opposite, where I had a case in 1993. This is an interesting case. It was a John Doe, but we didn't have a body. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Usually it's the other way around.
Yeah. So the story happened in a Greeley Mall. This woman got into a car with some friends, not friends of a friend. So she didn't know them, but they had weed, so she wanted to go smoke. So she's in the middle front seat. There's a driver and there's a guy in the back seat. And she knows the guy in the back seat's name, so kind of an acquaintance. Doesn't know the driver. They drive out into the county, smoke some marijuana, and pick up this other guy. So he's in the front seat, and she's in between the driver and this passenger. And they go drive out somewhere in the county, and passenger owes driver a lot of money for drugs. And passenger says, well, what if I don't pay you? And it gets heated. He says, I'm going to pay you. I'll pay you when I'm ready. And it's like, no, you need to pay me now. He says, what if I don't pay you? Driver picks up a gun and shoots him in the head and kills him. And she's in the middle. She gets splattered with blood.
Sure.
Yeah. They park somewhere, get some plastic that they had out of the trunk. So maybe this was pre-planned. Wrap him up in plastic, put him in the back seat. They go somewhere else and dump him somewhere. Then they go back to the Greeley Mall, where her friend was. And, they basically tell her, you're not going to talk about this, right? And So she didn't immediately, but she lived in Fort Morgan. So she drives back to Fort Morgan, and her brother is in law enforcement. So she tells her brother right away what happened. And so law enforcement gets involved, and detectives from the Weld County Sheriff's Office, because we figure the way she's describing it, it's somewhere out in the county. Sure. So detectives come out. But before she talked to her brother and before she did anything, she washed her clothes. She wanted to get out of her clothes, and I don't know how much blood was on it, but there's it wasn't a lot, but it was a little. But she did have some blood on her shoe still. She washed her clothes, but she still had her shoe, and she said, well, I do have because she didn't think that blood would be important evidence.
Sure. And
she just wanted to, get that off of her. So she says, I've got this shoe. So we take the evidence, and again, this is 1993. The lab is able to say that this is human blood. So, like, oh, well, great. This, now it's 2020. We can find out who this is and do genetic genealogy to identify this unknown person. So it goes to the lab, and before they get too far into it, they say, well, yeah, it is human blood, but it's female. So, and then I talked to her, and I'm like, yeah, this is female. But the thing is, later, she stuck to her story. If she had made that up, or if she had I don't know, maybe somebody put PCP in the weed she was smoking or whatever, and she hallucinated. And I asked her, I said, is there any possibility you're doing drugs, marijuana? Maybe you did some LSD or something like that. Do you think you could have hallucinated this? She was adamant. This is later, and she's not, she's cleaned up her life, and not that she was heavy, but into drugs, but, seemed, she was sober when I spoke to her.
Straight and narrow, so to speak. Yeah, grew up.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's no reason for her to stick to this story if she made or if she even thought that it was something that she didn't understand. So it seems like something happened, but I don't know if we're ever going to know what. It's a weird case.
No, it sounds like a weird case. And I talk about this all the time, is that in my job, as a defense attorney, you think you've seen it all. And then somebody does something else, and you're just like, it's unbelievable. Can't believe they did this. Or you hear a story that's so outlandish that nobody's going to believe this. This is crazy. And then you start investigating it, and it turns out, oh my gosh, this did happen. This person does exist. And that's the crazy thing about human nature, so to speak, is people could come up and put themselves in the most bizarre situations ever. Yeah. When you interview these witnesses, to homicide cases or something, obviously memories fade over time. Do the people still, like the lady, she's adamant that it was a guy sitting next to her in a car, and, the guy reaches over and, puts a bullet there in his head. She's very adamant. Do you find a lot of witnesses, though? Do they remember something that they didn't? They may say, hey, I told the detective that, but, you're looking at a report that's 30 years old that the guy was typing on an IBM Selectric, before there was computers. And he was tired for the day and didn't want to type it all. Where they say, oh, I remember telling the officer that, or anything like that. Do you run into that? When you go back and interview these witnesses?
Yeah, but it's interesting. It's just been minor stuff. It hasn't been something like, oh, that's completely different. It was like I had a woman who didn't remember whether her husband worked at Ames Community College or attended Ames Community College or what. But she remembered so much, so many details about the case otherwise.
Really?
Yeah. While, I remember everywhere my wife worked and attended school.
So obviously, when you have a cold case, so much depends on actually being able to, you have a hunch, but it really comes down to what you can prove. So, when you're going back and you have witnesses that have become deceased, passed away, is that why the DNA is so important these days? Something other than, somebody's story that's not coming in if they've passed away?
Yeah, and I think I can only speak for the Weld County District Attorney's Office, but they want, a strong case. Mm-hmm. most DAs. I think definitely want one, a strong case, but I think there's other DA's offices that will go with, if they have a lot of circumstantial evidence, or if it will, go through a grand jury. But our DA wants a pretty solid case, so you really want good evidence that's incriminating, or a confession that is corroborated by the facts.
Sure.
So, and of course, that's hard to get as a detective.
Yeah, and we've talked about this. That so many times prosecutors, no matter how solid of a case they think they have, they want corroboration. And on a cold case, obviously, every day, every year goes by, it becomes more difficult to prove because people pass away. How do you do it? I mean, you really have to go back and kind of start from the beginning, so that you can testify as to what you did, right? Because as you know, hearsay, you don't get to talk. Well, the detective talked to this person and this person, and they're now deceased, right? They're not subject to cross-examination. So you really have to independently go say, I did this and I did this, and then we tested this evidence, and here we go.
Yeah, and it can be interesting when you go on those wild goose chases where it's like, okay, I've got this. This should have evidence, DNA evidence on it. It's the victim's clothing, or it's a weapon that was found at the scene, and boy, it gets disappointing when you find out that it's not enough DNA to test. You have to have a certain amount. So, or just there's none. That's always disappointing. DNA, like anything on television, when it comes to portraying law enforcement or the law, it's not anywhere close to reality.
You mean CSI is not the way things work in the real world?
No.
Law and Order is not the way things work in the real world. Yeah. Not everything has DNA evidence on it, or like you said, there's not enough of it. Yeah. It's always funny where everybody thinks that it's CSI on TV.
Yeah.
And it's not.
No.
How much contact do you have with family members of, a victim of a case?
Well, I have as much as they want. I make myself available. I let them know my phone number and my email, and then I periodically will update them on, what's going on. Any major updates that can be released, I'll let them know. If I have something even that I can't release, I'll tell them, hey, the investigation is ongoing and we've got some good information.
Okay.
I'm optimistic about where the direction that the investigation is going.
And so are there some cases that you're working on right now that you can talk about where, maybe somebody knows something, where maybe there's some facts or something that's not going to damage your case, but something you can talk about, that, like I said, maybe somebody knows something out there?
Well, I'd like to think that that's the case with all of my cases, but like you said,
because somebody knows something.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Somebody always knows something.
Like you said, with as time goes by, and then a lot of these cases are involving people in the drug culture, and they don't live, healthy lifestyles. So it's not surprising to find out that they died in their 30s or whatever. So it's one thing I would like to talk about is the missing persons case of Nicole Silvers.
Please do. Tell me about Nicole Silvers.
She was a 16-year-old. She was living in Longmont, but her parents lived in unincorporated Meade. So when they reported her missing, and she was a juvenile, we took the report. But she was last seen in Longmont.
What year?
2014, April of 2014.
Okay. So relatively new as far as cold cases go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of my, it's my actually most recent. I had a 2018 missing person. He ended up being found dead in New Mexico. But the 2014 Nicole Silvers.
Okay.
She's working at Mead Pizza Plus, pizza restaurant there in Mead, going to school at Mead High School. She has friends who love her. Her family loves her. Nobody's threatened her. She doesn't have any, problems with anybody. No issues. Nobody's stalking her. No, boyfriend that's stalking her or anything like that. But everybody put a lot of work into that case ever since 2014. The detectives before me, and but yeah, there's just nothing. That's when I hope that somebody knows something.
Where was she found?
No, she's missing.
Oh, she's missing.
Yeah, that's the thing. So she was with her sister. Like, they went out that night, and she was staying with a friend and her mother in Longmont. Sister drives up to the house, and they talk in the car for a while. And I talked to sister later, and other detectives had talked to her, and she said, yeah, she never talked about running away. She was kind of that on the borderline of being, maybe wanting to run away. She wasn't she didn't run away a lot, but she wasn't getting along with the parents. So
okay.
So running away, doing something like that was a possibility, but she never talked about it, and she certainly didn't talk about it with her sister that night. So, and then the mother at the house had gotten up, gotten a drink at like 2 o'clock, saw her in the car with the sister. Sister says she went inside the house about 3. And then...
Were they just sitting out talking or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they hadn't seen each other for a while, so they're catching up.
Okay.
And that was like a Wednesday, I think. That was, 3 a.m. Wednesday morning. Nobody really sees her Wednesday. Then Thursday, her friend and the mother notice, wow, we haven't seen her in a while. Look in her bedroom, everything's gone. She really liked her guitar. Guitar's gone, but her guitar case is still there. If you really want to take care of your guitar case, you're going to bring the case. But if you're being abducted, how would somebody come in, and why would somebody come into your room and take all your stuff, but leave somewhat important stuff like a guitar case? Also,
and nobody heard her packing her stuff up and go?
No.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's...
What's her description? What is,
Let's see, she had colored red hair at the time. She's brunette normally. And she was like 5'3", Caucasian, I think about 120 pounds around there. She has a kind of a different earlobe. I don't know how to describe it, but her it's like it has an indentation in the lobe area. That's kind of distinctive for her. Yeah, but she's, you can find information on her on the internet. There's photographs of her where she's age progressed. But that's another thing with, like I said, maybe she wanted to just get away, join the circus or something like that. But
nobody knows.
Yeah. But then when she turned 18, all these people that love her, I can't imagine that she wouldn't reach out and say, hey, I'm okay. Now that I'm 18, I just wanted to get away. I had to get out of there, but now that I'm 18 and I'm an adult, I want to let you guys know that I'm okay and I love you. And, sorry, I went to Oregon or wherever. But that hasn't happened,
So when you have a missing persons case like that, I mean, would you check blotters of, Jane Does around the country? I mean, is there DNA from, hair sample or something you can take to put it out there into a CODIS or something to see if, something comes up? Yeah,
we have her DNA from family, and we also have her dental records. So
really, and no, 14. She just
16.
16.
In
she
2014.
disappears.
Yeah.
16 in 2014. She just disappears. And, 16-year-old, usually they want to contact somebody.
Yeah.
To say, hey, I'm okay, or feed my rabbit. I mean, anything like that, right?
Yeah.
And nobody's heard anything from her at all. Just gone.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like she voluntarily went somewhere. But then why isn't she? I mean, obviously she could have thought she was going with somebody that she trusted, or I don't know, maybe it was a job that she thought she was going to get and somebody was going to drive her there.
She must have a social security number. I would think she would. Anything show up on all those reports that you guys can get access to see if somebody's working?
No, nothing. Yeah, she hasn't worked. She hasn't pawned anything since then. So,
and no leads whatsoever.
No.
Nobody saw anything. No video from. 2014. I don't think there were Ring doorbells, so to speak, but
too many.
No video in the surrounding areas or anything like that.
No. Yeah, that's a conundrum. That's why I'd really like. I mean, I want to solve all my cases, but that one just really makes me scratch my head when I look at it.
Yeah, it's like, where do you even begin?
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk about a needle in a haystack, right?
Yeah. Well, and where I began was friends and family, and just wherever, any rabbit hole led me. But it's all, like I said, friends and family that just loved her, and she never said anything about anybody that would be, any kind of suspect.
And not in the drug subculture or anything like that.
No.
It was pretty straight and narrow, but didn't get along with mom at home.
Yeah. Yeah, typically, teenage thing.
Teenage girls that don't like their mom. Oh, shocking, right? Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Did she go by any nicknames or anything like that?
Nikki. So Nicole Silvers. She went by Nikki.
Okay. Yeah. And no family in other states that she could go to? Anything? No distant relative? Nothing?
No. Yeah. Bizarre.
Yeah, it is bizarre.
Yeah.
It is bizarre. Any other cases you want to kind of bring attention to that you're working on that you think maybe somebody could out there hear something, know something?
Boy, we have several cases where it's believed that they were probably murdered in Denver and dumped in Weld County because they were known prostitutes on Colfax. Yvonne Rabb, she was found in Weld County in 1981. She'd been killed and dumped. Valerie Meeks was in 1991, and Tammy Cheeks was in 1992. So Meeks and Cheeks in 91, 92. And Nelson in 1988. They thought there was a serial killer in the 80s, Cody Groves. But he was suspected of that. I just want to refresh my memory here.
Sure.
But it wasn't his M.O. Robin Nelson in 1988. So Vincent Groves was suspected, but her cause of death was a cocaine overdose. So that, I think, she was out with somebody doing drugs, cocaine, and she had an overdose and died, maybe in a car or a van or something like that. The person or people she was with was like, oh, we've got all these drugs. She just died. I gave her this cocaine, freaking out. What do I do? Panic or whatever. Go out. We'll just drive till we get to some middle of nowhere.
Middle of nowhere.
Weld County.
Country road.
Yeah.
This looks like a good spot.
Yeah. That's my theory on that.
Yeah. And so those cases that you mentioned, is there a description, any last known people that they were with? Anything along those lines that you can share, or if you even know, or a description of what they look like? Maybe somebody knows something.
Not that I can share. We have some suspect information, but it needs some corroboration, some work. So I'm still working on that. But I do have some names. But I had a name with Yvonne Rabb's case from 1981, and it turned out to not really pan out. So, but still working on it.
But you have to chase all those leads.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about this on our show that, oftentimes people think, oh, the laws, this is, going to make your case go away. It comes down to who can find the best facts, right?
Yeah.
And how do you find the best facts? By going out, knocking on doors, talking to people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's we've won some good cases over the years because we knocked on the door that, they were sleeping and they didn't hear the police come back and answer, or here's my ring doorbell. It's really about getting out there and, walking the scene, so to speak. Yeah. So how much do you coordinate with other jurisdictions? Like, for example, you said you had several cases where you think that they were prostitutes, either OD'd or they're killed in some manner, and then they're dumped out on a dark country road, thinking no one will ever know.
Yeah, the cold case detective in Larimer County is looking at a suspect that I was looking at too. So coordinated with him, and I get a lot of information from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation regarding just what kind of MO that other cold cases have in the state. So that's helpful. But yeah, I've talked with some others in the Denver area and Colorado Springs. Yeah, I mean, we certainly cooperate as much as possible. I haven't really had too many cases though that required like any pattern we see. It's like, I think we got the same suspect. Yeah. Other than the Larimer County issue.
One of the questions that went by is, have you ever consulted a psychic?
I have not, but yeah, and then in the late 70s they did, so that was interesting.
And I have mixed views on psychics. Some people swear by them. I mean, we have people that watch our show and, oh, you need to talk to psychic so and so. She's the one that solved this case and this and that. Color me skeptical, but some people truly believe it. If that's works, I guess, have you ever thought about doing that? Like, hey, we've got nothing to go on. I mean, I don't even know how you find a good psychic.
Yeah, I don't know
where to go. So
yeah, and I haven't even heard. I remember when I was a kid. In the 70s, I was a kid, so I remember like on That's Incredible. I think they profiled some psychic that was doing that with police work, and I was like,
sure.
I remember as a kid thinking, oh wow, psychics on this crime's going to go away. You can't fool a psychic.
Yeah, and they know everything, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they should warn people before it happens, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Have that Tom Cruise movie where they had precogs preventing crime in the future. Minority Report. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I did get a chuckle out of, because I had an audio cassette of her talking to the detectives, talking about how she sees that the victim was near a body of water. And then, of course, I know everything about the case, and she was on a street. She wasn't anywhere near water, stuff like that. It's like, boy, that didn't work in that case. So
yeah, that's why I'm always a little skeptical. Sometimes, I think the body is in the forest, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe some bushes in a backyard or a park. Like, close enough.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just calling me skeptic, Gold. That's for sure. When you have a suspect or you think we've got some information, do you ever just go to the suspect's house and knock on the door and say, hey, I'm Detective Kastilahn from the Weld County Sheriff's Department. Got a minute? Can we chat?
Yeah, but I've done that a few times, but with the cold case, most of the cold cases that we do have suspects, they're out of state. So unless I have really good information that he or she is a strong suspect, and I think that they'll confess or at least give some information, usually I don't do that. Go out to meet them. Maybe I'll try to coordinate with another agency to see if they could have a detective maybe do an interview with them and kind of suss them out.
Yeah, because, as a defense attorney, we talk about this all the time, is when somebody talks, call the lawyer, right?
Yeah.
They never call the lawyer. All they did, well, I just wanted to see I didn't talk with the detective. I didn't tell him anything. I just wanted to figure out what was going on. What was he talking about? And I usually have to say, so how long did this conversation that didn't say anything, happen to go on? They're always, no more than an hour or so. And they usually just completely bury themselves. So I was just curious if sometimes you just go, we're no farther ahead than, so let's just go for it. Let's go knock on the door and see if they say something. Maybe their conscience comes over them and anything like that.
Yeah. And I'd always do that, as a regular detective,
Sure.
At least get a statement from them, because maybe they're innocent. So, but yeah, that's the problem with the cold cases. Either you don't have a suspect, or the suspects that you do have aren't, nearby.
Well, I'm assuming, I was like all agencies, you guys have budgets, but I'm assuming the sheriff, does your funding come from the sheriff's office, or is it a grant or something from the federal government or state?
It's the sheriff's office, but we do have some federal grants. And we have gone, like, for instance, with there was Ed Jordan was a detective, and he flew out to Florida to interview Otis Toole. So he's a fairly well-known serial killer. He was friends with a serial killer who had a movie made about him in 1990. Henry Lee Lucas.
Okay.
So Henry Lee Lucas is fairly well-known. Otis Toole is also well-known. But so for Fithian, who was killed in 1975, we thought that maybe Otis did this because he might have been in Colorado at the time, and in 1981 he was confessing to a lot of serial killings of women. So Ed Jordan, as a detective, they flew him out to Florida to interview him. So and that's a case of where you have a suspect who's maybe likely to confess because he's confessing to the other. If I have something like that in my case, where I was in Weld County in 1981, and I was killing prostitutes and dumping them in Weld County, and I'm confessing to all these and murders that I did in Denver or wherever.
Yeah.
Then they'd fly me to Japan, I'm sure, to interview him if that's where he was.
Sure.
Because if he's confessing about those, maybe he'll tell me whether he did this.
Yeah.
Case that I have.
For example, I think you said you had, 3 or 4 cases involving prostitutes where you believe the bodies were dumped in Weld County. Probably, they were picked up on Colfax or somewhere thereabouts. Yeah. And for those who don't know, Colfax is the longest street in America, but there's a stretch of it called East Colfax. It's cleaning up a little bit now with the hospitals and everything opening up over there, but there's still some stretches that are pretty bad, and it always had a history of lots of drug use, gangs, prostitution, you name it. Anything that could go wrong or was bad and going wrong, it was usually taking place on Colfax.
Yeah.
And it's tough. I know you don't want to, you can't say, oh, this is my, things change based upon new information. But do you think, there's like serial killers and this is where they get the women, kill the prostitutes, go. Obviously the one OD'd, so who knows? It could have been completely, everything's cool, consensual. Somebody just freaks out and panics. Maybe not even murder, right? It's just, why didn't you just take her to the hospital or something, right? Yeah. But, as a detective, do you look at these and say, oh, this is the same MO? I know you can't give away things that are going to compromise your cases, but is it just more one-offs, or do you think it's usually more than just kind of one person?
Well, I'm trying to get that information from the FBI to see if they knew that there were serial killers active during this time frame in this location. So I'm actually in the midst of doing that, so I'm waiting to hear back on that. But certainly some of these murders could have been serial killers that we don't know about. My gut instinct is that it was drug related. Well, I mean, so many of my cases are drug related.
And
I think
and so many and like I said, I'm a defense attorney, and people are like, "Oh, go do drugs," and this is me talking here, but people don't realize the scourge of the collateral consequences that come with it. And I'm no teetotaler, all right? I mean, don't get me wrong. Kind of do what you want, just don't hurt anybody else. But it usually winds up hurting so many other people, and the stuff that comes with it. I mean, it sounds cliche, the violence, the cartels, things like that. It's a real thing that most people have no idea that what takes place, that it's really going on, and bad things come with it. It really does. It's a thing, so to speak.
Oh, yeah. When I went into cold case, I had somewhere between 50 and 55 cases. And I think maybe 3 or 4 of them were domestic violence related. All the rest are drug related.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so many of the cases that we have, there's usually some sort of, like I said, domestic violence or drug undertone, so to speak. Lifestyle, somebody got shorted, robbed, drug deal gone bad, those kinds of things. It never ends. And some people are like, "Oh, it's a victimless crime, drug deal." Yeah, not really, because so many things, and you get people get addicted to it, and then they go rob things, steal things from family members to go get the drugs, and steal cars, and it really isn't victimless, and it's a scourge. I was in federal court not long ago, and the judge said, a very senior U.S. District Court judge, and she's like, it's a scourge on society. It really has an impact, and people aren't thinking about that when they're using it, selling it, giving it away, whatever. But there's nothing really good that comes from it, and people's little escape from reality. At the end of the day, you're coming back to reality, unless you die. Yeah. So it's bad news for sure. But that's just me.
And the drug dealers have to keep a tight business. So if they're being disrespected or somebody is out there showing that they don't have to pay for their drugs, they need to be made an example of. Yeah. And what better way than to murder them? And that's one thing where the cartels are involved. There's a few cases that I have that are definitely cartel involved. And we have a couple where we know the people, and there's active arrest warrants for them, and they're in Mexico.
Sure.
So, and they've been in Mexico since the 90s. Yeah. So, and then others that the suspects went back to Mexico, and matter of fact, in all appearances, it seemed that they came from Mexico just to kill this person and then went back.
Yeah, it's a thing, and the cartel people don't realize this, but I mean, I've had kids where they go in, body armor, strapped. They know where the guy is. They go in and get him.
Yeah.
Pay the ransom, or we're gonna, do bad things to him. Yeah. It's violent stuff, and it just keeps getting, farther and farther north of the border, so to speak, because I think they're kind of getting away with it, so to speak. That's just my perspective. One guy's perspective.
As an attorney, what percentage of cases do you deal with where drugs are involved?
Wow. In some way or another, I mean, 99% of all of our cases are sex, drugs, and alcohol. I mean, there's usually some undertone. When it comes to violent stuff, there's usually drugs or alcohol involved, whether it be a DV or somebody's all fired up. But homicides, there's, I would say 90%, there's some sort of illicit drug involved in one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's, and like I said, I don't want to sound like a teetotaler because I'm not, but nothing good comes from it. Like, unless your doctor has prescribed it for you, don't take it. And today, with all the fentanyl.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know people where their family members have died, friends like, "Hey, can I get one of those pills? I want to be relaxed for the weekend or something." and then bam, they're dead because it contained 100% fentanyl, and they're just dead.
Yeah.
And it's like, why would you take that? But yet, and then you get these drug dealers, like, they don't care who they kill. I mean, putting out a pill, 100% fentanyl, like, it's just going to kill you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that makes no sense to me either. And I've just never got the whole drug thing. I mean, I was either been, I was in sports or I was in the military, and then I just got too old and I had no desire to do anything like that. I have an older brother who's, had a bunch of issues with alcohol, kind of come from a long history of alcoholics in my family. So I'm just make it easy. I'm not going to drink. So, and obviously I've seen how many lives it's ruined. As a criminal defense attorney, I've seen, people with great careers, families lose it all because they get addicted on drugs. And I see it so often, even in the attorney community, police officers, attorneys, there's lots of alcoholism in there because, they have a bad day and they have a drink or two. Yeah. And then that drink or two becomes the norm. And it was a real bad day, so we'll have 3 or 4. And then 4 is the norm. And, and I know a lot of police officers. I've represented a lot of police officers over the years and given advice. But, it's a tough business that we're in. And I remember, I've sat around once. I was at the Brown Palace having a cigar, and there were a couple gentlemen there, and they were talking, and they turned out to be police officers. And then I said, "Hey, do you know so-and-so?" I was in the Marine Corps with him, and I knew he was a sergeant with that unit or with that jurisdiction. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, we know him." And we started talking, and I was like, I bet we probably agree on more than you probably think because we've seen it all. I mean, we see the dark side of human nature, so to speak, and makes you kind of cynical. Do you find you've become very cynical over the years? Or do you still have that hope of humanity?
Yeah, I got cynical probably in my 30s, but now I've gotten more optimistic because I just, learned to cope and then kind of thrive. Now I enjoy the challenge, and I just, don't take the losses personally. Just do the best. And
no, I think that's the best I know as a young attorney, I was always, oh my gosh, this case hangs on me. What am I going to do? Yeah. After a while, you're like, I'm not the ones that created the facts. Yeah. I'm doing what I can with what I've come up with. And then as time goes on, like I said, you become a little more cynical. You're very skeptical, prove it. But yeah, I think there's a lot more optimism as you get older, like, kind of things that restore your faith in humanity every now and then. Like, when you guys solve a case, probably restores your faith in humanity a little bit. Yeah. Where some days I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
And I'm like you, I didn't create the facts. I'm just the consequence here of your actions.
Exactly. And you're just going to collect the evidence, go wherever the evidence leads you and let the chips fall where they may. I mean, that's always been my experience with, the really good police officers, the good detectives. And, I've had circumstances where I remember once I cross-examined a detective. He was in a gang task force and, beat him up pretty bad, but it was nothing personal. And he wouldn't shake my hand. I was like, hey, nothing personal, right? And he just kind of, and then years later I saw him at a debriefing in a federal case. And he kind of, gave me the dirty eye, and the U.S. attorneys and the other agents like, oh, Scott's okay. Then I've had other detectives that I talk to, and they're like, man, that's good to know. Like, I'll never make that mistake again. Like, it made me a better police officer by you doing it. And I used to teach years ago, and I said, listen, nobody wants the bad guy to go free. So you got to put it in the report, right? Write it up in the report so that it's bulletproof and nobody's going to be able to do anything about it. And most people, I think, realize when you went into police work, did you think you were going to be writing that many reports?
No, not that many. And that's, it's funny. I went to college so I could be an FBI agent, and then I didn't really, I don't think I wasted college, because college was fun for one thing, but it made me a better writer. I did a lot of writing in college, and so, report writing was fairly easy. for me. So.
But you do a lot of it, and I don't think they recruit police officers on the fact that you're going to get to write a lot.
Yeah, and be descriptive, but also concise. So.
Yeah, that's what everybody looks at, right? The district attorney looks at it and, all right, is this enough to file the case? Defense attorney looks at it like, wow, they dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's. We got nothing. Whereas the other, like, they didn't consider this, right? I mean, and then somebody asks the detectives or the investigators to go back and take a second look at something, right? But that's such an important part of good police work, and on my side of it is that it depends on how they wrote it up. I tell clients all the time, let's wait and see how it's written up in the report.
Yeah, and it's interesting how being a DUI officer can prepare you for being a detective, because you get that attention to detail. Doing a DUI arrest is very involved. You're writing a summons, you're writing a report, you're writing a Department of Revenue revocation, notice of revocation. You're dealing with evidence. You're making an arrest safely and booking them into jail, maybe to the hospital, maybe to detox, maybe just releasing on a summons. There's so many things, so many T's to cross and I's to dot in DUI enforcement.
Do I have reasonable suspicion to pull somebody over? Do I have enough probable cause to make the arrest?
Yeah. Do I know my SFSTs and all the points on everything?
All the sobriety points. Did I demonstrate it correctly?
Yeah. And am I going to be able to articulate it in court later?
Exactly.
And a DOR hearing.
Exactly. And most people don't realize that. And I mean, I think you nailed it. It's that attention to detail. I remember when I had a drill instructor in boot camp that would always say that failure to pay attention to detail demonstrates an inability to accept larger responsibility. And that has stuck with me since the summer of 1988. That because it's so true, right? If somebody's like, whatever, but if they can drill down that attention to detail, it's noticeable, and it also says they're ready for the next level as well. So, and like you said, writing reports. I mean, there's a reason they don't start everybody off as detective, right?
Right.
You got to get all that practice of, I spoke with so-and-so. They said this. They gave a description. Yeah. It's all those things you learn over time. By the time you become a detective, that they should have done this, or they did it right. Yeah. So. Yeah. How long does your rotation in cold case last?
It's indefinite.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I haven't been told that. I assume until maybe they want to get some fresh eyes in there after a while. But yeah, I've been doing it 2 years now. So,
do you ever consult with other detectives and other units, saying, "Hey, I got this case. Can you tell me something about what are your thoughts about this?"
Yeah, it's usually the former detectives. I've spoken to probably all of the former Weld County detectives about one case or another. And then Tracy Regains was a homicide from 1989, but give you a little background on that case. She was working at a bar when she was 17 years old. It was a strip club. And the owner of that club had another club burned to the ground. So she, told detectives about that. And so he was charged with arson, and the two guys who actually did it were charged. And then she was also going to be a witness, kind of a prostitution thing, because she was 17 and she was involved in nefarious things through the club. Mm-hmm. And then she ended up dead and dumped in Weld County. So the detectives that were working on that with the attorney, the district attorney's office and the Colorado Springs Police Department worked with them, because they had cases involving her and the suspects down there. So they were very important. That's still an ongoing case, so still working on that. But they've been helpful.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you've had a couple of successes. I mean, shortly after you became the cold case detective, you were able to solve a couple of cases. I don't know how much you can talk about that because before we started, you mentioned that the cases are pending. So I don't want you to say anything that's going to jeopardize the cases. But can you just talk generally about the cases that have been solved?
Yeah, I can mention Kay Day. That's been in the news. Kay Day was a mother of two, lived in Evans. Her husband worked at a grocery store there in the Greeley area. She was a mom and a wife and worked as a realtor and a business monitor at Ames Community College. And she was found dead in the back of her car back in November of 1979. And that was one of the primary cases that Sheriff Reams wanted me to look at. It was an older case. And that was a case where, for various pretty good reasons, they were looking at the husband. He did some, I guess, for lack of a better word, suspicious things, but didn't really convince me. I mean, I could see its possibility. Definitely going to look into it.
Sure. We got to look into it, but yeah.
So I'm looking at that case, and I realize that there is pretty good DNA evidence on that. So that led us to Wichita, Kansas, where we arrested James Dye, and so that's coming up in court here pretty soon. So that was one. Some of the cases that I cleared out were just showing that they weren't crimes. For instance, I had a case in 1986 where a lady had terminal cancer. She only had a few weeks to live, and she had fallen down her stairs, and she was able to call for an ambulance. Ambulance comes. She tells them, I fell down these stairs and I've hit my head. And then the husband came home later while the paramedics are there. And he was with a friend. He was with a friend fishing. So the paramedics take her to the hospital, and she dies a few days later from the injury of the head. And because there was a history of domestic violence with him and her, they looked into that as a homicide, which is, good. You'd want to rule that out. But then they kind of just, detectives forgot about it. I'm sure they got other cases that they had to deal with and just got lost in the shuffle. So, but
sure.
until you get a full-time cold case detective that's looking at all these cases, they're just going to be there. So, and that happened a few times with cases that it's like, yeah, this was an accident. This person, all the witnesses say that he killed her and then he killed himself. So we don't need to have this as a cold case. So a lot of it was housekeeping, basically.
Yeah,
but it was work showing that, yeah, this is definitely not homicide.
Well, like the lady that fell down the step. I mean, obviously you want to investigate and look at all possibilities to see if something's there. But it's just as important to clear innocent people of that suspicion as it is to find somebody that's actually responsible for, the committing of the crime.
Yeah.
I mean, that's significant too. I mean, if the spouse, did they do something? Did they, and always wonder, so to speak. Yeah. So it's, that's just as important. A couple of
real quick. That's what was helpful for me in being a death investigator with the coroner's office.
Yeah.
Because you want to look at all those and make, even if they're 90 years old and seems like natural causes. There's been cases where people were poisoned or even killed, stabbed or shot, but they're like, oh, she's in bed, and then you move the body and you do the autopsy, or you take the clothes off and you realize, oh, wait, we got bullet holes or something like that. So that can be very embarrassing if you're a death investigator and that happens. So you don't want that to happen. So again, we're back to attention to detail.
And you have to assume nothing.
Exactly.
Don't assume anything.
Yep.
Unless you've kind of seen it or looked at it yourself, never assume that that's absolutely accurate if somebody else did it, so to speak.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to exhume remains?
I didn't, but I did a case from 1968, Leroy Dreeth, and his case actually was on Unsolved Mysteries. So the sister had got some information and had the body exhumed in 1993, and had a coroner look at that, and that was an interesting case for sure. The problem was that there was suspected that Leroy's girlfriend, her family didn't like him, so that they slit his throat. But I talked to the girlfriend and the girlfriend's sister-in-law, and they said that they saw Leroy leave in the car. I mean, he left in the car. Nobody attacked him, nobody anything. And he ended up driving down and crashing into a tree. And that so this is a case where you don't have a state CSP, Colorado State Patrol report. I mean, maybe they did one, but they purge all their files after 10 years. The coroner, so he went to Longmont Hospital in Longmont, so the Boulder coroner ended up with it, and he just ruled it as a traffic accident because all evidence at the time seemed like it was a traffic accident.
Yeah.
But later on in the 90s, it's like, well, we think that there is some problems between Leroy and the girlfriend's family. But as I looked into it, people, his family and friends said that he was speeding all the time. He drove really fast a lot. Dad and brother said he had been drinking that day, and that he had been working on his car's brakes. So, that was the oldest case. But yeah, everything, points to an accident with that. But he was exhumed, in 1993.
And this is a bit of a digression, but you said you worked for the coroner's investigator. Is the Weld County coroner an actual medical examiner, MD, or they're an elected official, but sometimes they're not?
Yeah, Weld County's is appointed. I think there's 4 counties in Colorado that appoint theirs. The others are elected, and it's minimum qualifications typically. But Weld County, ours is a medical doctor, Dr. Michael Burson.
Okay.
And prior to that was our coroner with Weld County was Carl Blesch, and he had a long, distinguished career in law enforcement. He was a captain with the Adams County Sheriff's Office.
Oh, really?
While also being a physician's assistant, and being in the medical field since the 60s. So we've had some very qualified coroners at the office.
Yeah, I had an expert witness years ago. I used him. He was great. He was a coroner, and then he also did medical exams. He did some private consulting. But we would go to dinner, and when he'd come to town, we'd get ready for a case, and the stories that he would tell are just hilarious. I mean, when they would go in, find people a lot of weird positions, maybe hanging in a closet, like autoerotic asphyxiation kind of things, with various things stuck in various orifices of the body. People do some crazy things. Then once he said they showed up and they found something underneath the sink that they thought was, it must have been human remains, like of a child or something. So he says they go in and they have the cart and they wheel it up and they take this item, what they think maybe is a fetus or something, put it on the cart and they wheel it in. And by the time they get to the autopsy room, they figure out that it's an onion. but they didn't know.
At least they're thorough.
They were thorough. But some of the stories, I'm sure you probably have got stories like that where, like you
crazy
said,
like that.
But the situations where people can get them into where they, lack of a better term, accidentally kill themselves, not intending to, but it's just a strange world. It's a crazy world, the things that people can come up with and do. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know. Yeah, it's got to give you some satisfaction on these cold cases when you all solve something and bring peace to the family, the judicial system, and people held accountable. Because I think everybody wants somebody held accountable if they did it right and the state can prove it. That's just the way the system works.
Yeah,
and that's got to be a good thing. Anything about your career you would change? Other than do you ever regret not going to the FBI? I mean, frankly, Quantico's not that nice any time of the year. It's either hot or it's really cold.
No, I've all the FBI agents I've met been really nice, super helpful with stuff. So yeah, I mean, but yeah, I don't regret being in law enforcement in Colorado. I've had a great time. I really enjoyed patrol, like I said, and I've really enjoyed investigations and stuff that I've had.
That's great. Do you? I mean, not that you have to tell us, but you any plans on retiring, or are you going to keep doing this as long as they'll let you?
Yeah, I don't have any plans for retirement. I know a lot of people count down the days or whatever, but I still love the job. I like doing it, and I like staying busy, and I can't think of anything better to do that can hold your interest and be have its rewards. So.
Well, at least you're in a jurisdiction where, at least from what I know about Weld County, is that they support the police up there, and you guys have a lot of support, and you guys got a good sheriff, a good previous sheriff, and so a lot of people don't also realize that the sheriff's a pretty important guy in that county.
Yeah.
Maybe there may be a few politicians here and there, but really the sheriff is kind of the one that people trust.
Yep.
I had a case on the Western Slope years ago where the sheriff had been there for like 40 years.
Yeah.
They weren't going to term limit him. They loved him.
Yeah.
He was there at their kid's, birth, and, he's going to be there at his, the grandmother's funeral. He was there he knew everybody. And if he said it was written in stone. So, at least you're in a jurisdiction where they support the police and everything, because it is a tough job. And when I went to the sheriff's office, I had so many people when I was in patrol who just come over and say, thank you for what you do. Had that with all my agencies, but it seemed like way more with the sheriff's office. So okay, yeah, and well, that's good.
Yeah.
And I asked you this beforehand, but people are going to, if they don't think, obviously Weld County was the Chris Watts case. And I asked you, did you work the Chris Watts case? What did you say?
I missed it. I was with the coroner's office at the time, and I ended up getting a suicide like 14 minutes before they called the coroner for that case. So
to go out to the well site?
Yeah. Yeah. So
that was a bad case.
Yeah.
And we have people that still, I had to call the office. How? He's innocent. I can't believe it. And I just keep saying, he confessed.
Yeah.
Not once, not twice, like 3 times he confessed. He pled guilty. It's over. He killed his wife, 2 kids, and unborn child.
Wow.
Let's get it over. But I mean, I know you guys can't talk about it.
I wasn't involved. I was almost involved, but yeah, I didn't know much other than what's on the news.
Yeah, there was a case that, had he not pled guilty, it would still be going on.
Probably,
it would be years with the death penalty. But, the DA up there is he's a good guy. Knew him when he used to be a DA back in Arapahoe County. And so I think he's making good choices up there from what I can tell.
Michael Rourke?
Yeah, Michael Rourke.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been up there for a long time, but like I said, he started out in Arapahoe County as a, county deputy. and I don't know if he's term limited up there, is he? I think he is, isn't he?
Not sure. I mean, I know he is, but I don't know if it's coming up. Yeah. I mean, when I was in Brighton, Quammen was the assistant district attorney at Adams County, and now he's a judge. And I've had other Adams County DAs that I worked with at Brighton that came up to Weld to work, and so seeing familiar faces. Weld County DA's office, I love working with them. They're great.
Yeah, I have several cases up there right now, because the Denver metro area seems to just get bigger and bigger, and it's no longer going way out there.
Yeah.
So it's great. Is there any other cases you want to talk about?
One thing,
this is your chance, because I'm telling you, there's always somebody that knows something. So if you got one that you think is important,
let me digress real quick.
Of course.
I just thought, as I'm reading all my cases, I'm noticing certain strange patterns, and I started writing them down. And it's just strange what a small world it is. So, in 1975, the Marjorie Fithian case, it was documented, and I'm just going to use a first name. But,
that's fine. We don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize any type of investigation, so I'll defer to you.
So in the Marjorie Fithian case from 1975, it was documented that this man named Larry was arrested by Denver PD a block from the bus terminal where she was last seen. So he was looked at as a suspect, but he had an alibi. But then in 1985, this Larry person was the prime suspect in Denise Davenport's case, cold case. Okay. So that's strange. 10 years later, there's a guy named Mark who was an associate of the suspects in the Fithian case. After Carmen divorced one of my suspects in the cold case, she married this guy Mark in the 80s. So he was involved in that, and then ended up marrying the ex-wife of a prime suspect. There's a guy named Chuck who was a person of interest in Denise Davenport's case from 1985. And then the 1993 John Doe case with the blood on the shoe, there's a witness named Teresa from that case in 1993. Well, she and Chuck got married in 2008.
Small world.
Yeah. And then this is just odd, the name Evelyn. So Evelyn K. Day was the victim of the 1979 homicide. Her husband's mother's name was Evelyn Day. Valerie Meek's mother's name was Evelyn Jones. Nicole Silvers from 2014, missing person. Her full name is Nicole Evelyn Silvers. And then there's an Evelyn who was a witness in the Yvonne Rabb case from 1981. And the suspect in that case, his wife's name is Evelyn Brown. So
maybe somebody have some mommy issues with their mom named Evelyn.
Strange how that name just kept coming up. And then this is a fun fact. Judge Jim Hartman, not the Judge Jim Hartman in Weld County currently, but his dad.
Okay.
Former Weld County Sheriff's Under Sheriff Rick Dill and Tony Malosnik, who was a DA investigator in the 90s, and I believe he was a Greeley cop back then. And he investigated the Leroy Dreeth case in the 90s, the person who was exhumed. They were in the lineup for the suspect in Kay Day's case. He had a case in 1977, and he was in a lineup with those three in front of the victim. So they needed males that were somewhat close to his age, and so they got the judge, the undersheriff, and a detective. I just thought that was interesting.
It shows you how the things have changed. The old lineups used to be, let's get 6 guys that look familiar, what have you, or another 5, and now it's all, they put it at the booking photo into a computer, and it generates 5 other similar photographs.
Yeah. The Usual Suspects is a great movie, but I've never done an actual person lineup.
I've never seen one done in my experience. It was always just photographs, and things have changed. It used to be the lead detective saying, "Here it is," or "Here's a book. Go look through the booking photos," kind of thing.
Yeah.
And now it's so generated, and then you have a detective who has no connection to the case whatsoever, so they can't subconsciously, say, "Oh, you're getting warm," or "You're cold," that kind of thing. I mean, it's interesting how things have changed. I mean, I remember I used to view VHS tapes, in my office, and now, we just download all the digital stuff and watch it on our computers.
Yeah.
It's It's amazing.
I'd have to say, hey, can you bring all these documents by the police department so I can photocopy them? And now I can just take photos on my phone.
Yeah.
It's gotten a bit easier.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think this is just absolutely amazing. These Ring doorbells.
Oh yeah,
where the police can send out say there's a car stolen in a particular neighborhood. They can send out like within a 5-block radius of there to all the people. Will you give us access to your Ring doorbell photos, video during this time period on this particular day? And they just hit yes, and boom, it goes straight to the detective.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing, the technology.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time before we can, read license plates, because that's really the only drawback right now is you can't really read license plates from cars in the street from a Ring doorbell camera, but you can see pretty much everything else.
Yeah, and get a good description, right?
Yeah.
And then you just go to the DMV and say, how many, white 1998 Toyota Tundra trucks are there? And then you narrow it down.
Partial. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
But yeah, for sure you're getting the suspect description, the vehicle description.
Yeah, and narrows it down. It's what's the biggest, I guess, change that you've seen in your years as a police officer that you just like, wow?
Oh, the technology. I mean, it doesn't seem that long ago, but I guess the 90s have been 25, 30 years. But yeah, when I started, like with Brighton Police Department, with Mark, we had nunchucks on our belt. We had nunchucks, a gun, spare magazines, and a radio. And that was it. And then
you were on your own.
Radio in the car. And then a few years later, we got the MDT in the car.
We got for the people who aren't familiar with that, what's an MDT?
A mobile data terminal. It's a laptop in your car. They now, just back in 1998 when we got them in Brighton, all you could do was run license plates and driver's licenses.
And now when you run those, correct me if I'm wrong, you can get the driving history, who the car's registered to, is the person on probation, parole,
do they have a warrant,
warrants, warrants. All right there in this seat of your car.
Yeah, and now we get, and for 15, 20 years, we've been getting actual dispatch information. Like lower level calls will just get dispatched to you, so it doesn't take up radio. So, minor graffiti or something, your MDT will beep and you'll hopefully pull over and you're safe, and you look at the call and it's like, okay, I need to go here, talk to this person, and nothing's on the radio. Before it was just dispatch saying, copy a graffiti over here, meet Joe Smith.
Yeah.
And he's got this. So
now it just goes directly to you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And all that information from dispatch is on your MDT, so you can, unless you write it down from the radio days, you're not going to know that. Maybe you're going to be on the radio more because you're asking dispatch, who was this, did that? But then you can go to the MDT. The taser, OC spray.
More non-lethal stuff.
Yeah, less lethal shotgun, stuff like that. The technology's really, and then technology and investigations obviously is improved. Yeah. So that's a big thing.
And obviously we talked about the DNA and the genealogical DNA. I think that's just a game changer. Yeah. Where these old cases, there's homicide, sexual assaults, things of that nature, where they have these kits and haven't been tested, they're going to be able to go back and do those things.
Yeah,
that'd
be good.
It's really amazing. I don't know. I just think it's even looking back from when I first started. You got a case file, you had a couple of reports, a little narrative. Okay, let's go to court. And now it seems like we do a lot less. And I'm a firm believer, like video interrogations. Used to be, oh, my client said this. Oh yeah, he didn't say that. Let's have a motion to suppress, But now it's all videotaped, and are you agreeing to talk with me? Initial here. Nobody's forcing you, pressure. It's eliminated a lot of that need to go to court and say, my guy didn't say that.
Helps with complaints too. I know of several complaints where citizen says, hey, this person said this, and he was rude to me, and he called me this and that, and then the IA person or the sergeant, whoever, says, oh really? Well, here's the video. You want to watch it with me?
Yep. let's watch the video. Yeah, no, I had a meeting with a detective in Denver not long ago, and it was nothing serious, but they want to inspect a vehicle, and the detective comes out and he says, "Hey, just want to let you know, I'm turning on my body worn camera. I don't go anywhere without it." He goes, "I don't interview anybody." I'm like. He goes, "I just don't want you to say anything you may regret." I said, "I understand. I appreciate that." He did what he had to do. We walked around. We turned it off. And I said, "I get it. Some days I'd like to have one of those." No, that's not what I said at all. That's why I still spend most of my day doing confirming letters. This will confirm that you agreed to say this and that we agreed to this offer. And because I know it's shocking, but sometimes clients change their minds. So, yeah. It's just the way things have changed. And I can imagine in the next 20 years, it's going to be something out of a science fiction movie because, one, there's so much video everywhere these days. And, even if something takes place where there is no video, there's probably video a block away, half a block away. And they're going to chase down those cars and figure it out.
Yeah, dare to hope that it's possible that we might live in a world that is free of crime because there's nothing you can get away with that's not videoed. Yeah.
Well, even if it's videoed, there's some jurisdictions that are allowing it to take place. Like, it's just not serious enough to. I read somewhere that I think it was a convenience store that was getting shoplifted so much.
Oh yeah.
That he was reporting to the police, and the police were like, well, we don't have personnel to get out there, and of course they're gone, and the DAs were going to prosecute anyway. So the guy said, fine, I'll just pass it along to my consumer just because I can't afford to do it. So he put a tax or surcharge of 1% of all sales to cover his losses on that. So once again, the law-abiding citizen gets screwed by having to pay more for the guy that's stealing it, and it just makes no sense. It's complete death of common sense.
Yeah.
What's going on today? I was like, oh, it's great that my client that got bond, and you're thinking, Judge, let him out of jail. No, don't let him. It's great, it makes me, clients make happy, but as a member of the community, I'm shocked and outraged some days of what is taking place, where it's just like, this is just common sense. And I was talking to a DA one day, and I'm just like, we're just both like, what the hell is going on? It just makes no sense what some jurisdictions are doing. And there's always going to be crime. There'll always be job for police and defense attorneys, but I see what works, what doesn't work, and I'm letting them go isn't the thing that works, right? It's like, that's just me. But anyway, all right. All right. So that was a good little, coincidences there, so to speak. That's the kind of stuff that can keep you up at night. Like, is there some connection here? Do you put the stuff up on the board and diagram it and things like that?
No, but it's funny. I sent an email out to my supervisors with this information, and my sergeant had it's a meme of Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, I believe, where he's got a cigarette in his hand and he's pointing at this map with all the and I haven't seen the show, but I've seen the meme several times, and he says, "How to Cold Case" by Byron Kastilahn. So I have that up in my office. It looks like wait a minute, what, Evelyn over here and Evelyn over there.
Yeah, there's must be a connection. No, I get it, but sometimes you never know. And that's why we've had cases where, really, I don't believe it. And then you go, it's like, oh my God, that's true. I had a case years and years ago. They're like, you need to go talk to this guy that I was a roommate with 25 years ago, cold case. And he will confirm this series of events that I came home with blank that I had found in a particular location. Right, really? Like, I'm really going to find this guy 20, send my investigator off to another state, knocks on the door. My investigator calls me up. He goes, "You're not going to believe this."
Wow.
Everything, the client, that was the guy, it was the location, he recalled everything. And you're just like, what? This makes no sense to me. But sometimes the most bizarre things happen, and it's maybe not believable to us, but it actually happened.
Yeah.
It's it's very, very crazy world out there.
Yeah.
So
my cases have been pretty straightforward. Like I said, that 1993 one with the blood on the shoe was strange. But, yeah, like I said, they're mostly drug-related and people trying to either make a statement or getting even, I think.
Well, that's a lot of that in the drug culture. Like he talked about, they can't let people disrespect them, so to speak, so they got to take it out on somebody. And obviously the cases where the prostitutes wind up dumped out there, whether they were natural death or not natural, people freak out, or that's their thing, which is just sad all around. But it's an unfortunate world that we live in. But at least you're trying to make it a little better place, at least trying to get some justice for not only society, but, for the families to get some resolution, before maybe they pass away, find out exactly what happened. Because everybody has a story, and you like to think that somebody has someone out there that loves them, misses them, but has nowhere to turn, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely owe it to the families to give it my best. So that's what keeps me going every day.
All right. Well, thank you, Detective Brian Kastilahn from
Thanks for
the
having
Weld
me.
County Sheriff's Department. Thank Mark for putting us in contact. And like I said, if you ever have a case or anything else you want to come talk about that you think maybe there's something there, or what, please come back. Seriously, we can talk about anything.
Great,
as long as it doesn't jeopardize your cases or anything like that. We're all about putting that information out there, because I'm a true believer that someone knows something. Maybe a guy's sitting at a bar, maybe he's drinking because he can't forget it out or put it out of his mind, or maybe he's going to write it on his deathbed. Someone knows something. People can't keep a secret like that. They got to tell somebody. And it's just the person that they told it to needs to have the courage to come forward. In my humble opinion,
I agree.
One person can't keep a secret like that. It would tear them up too much.
I like to think
they got to
so.
tell somebody, family, good friend. There's something, and somebody is either not telling them, telling it to the police out of loyalty or fear, some reason. But I just truly believe they have to tell somebody, and not their attorney, because the attorney can never disclose it. But family member or friend, I think that's,
Or if they want to tell me, please do.
Yeah. Is there a number somebody could call, or an email, if somebody had information on any of the cases that maybe they heard something about?
Yeah, my direct line is 970-400-2827. And I don't know if my name is going to be in the show notes, but it's my first initial and last name at weldgov.com, weldgov.com. It's my email. But unless you see it, B. Kastilahn is not a very common name. So
no, we'll put it in the notes so that everybody can do that, because you just never know. You never know who, or somebody heard something or say, "Wow, they do deserve to know." So all right. Well, thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Anytime, you're welcome back. Just like Mark, I said, come on down. Anytime you want. Maybe we could do it. Have both of you guys together. You guys can reminisce about your days in Brighton and tell us all the good stories. So, all right. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thanks for watching Crime Talk, and we will talk to you soon. I think we're going to do a Patreon. If we got a couple minutes, we can do a quick show. All right. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Have a great one.